Okay, I wanted to briefly show you what the ring grinder that I use looks like. This is a very common tool. You can pick these up virtually anywhere. All of the normal auto parts suppliers, anywhere you could get certainly rings and pistons, you can get a ring gap filer. You can get them on Amazon as well. They're all about the same quality. So I wouldn't spend a large amount of money on something like this, but do be wary that there is some junk out there. And so if you've just dropped a couple $1,000s on a really nice rotating assembly, you would want to make sure that the tool that you're using to grind your ring gaps is up to the task. So it's a very simple tool to use. It has a flat platform here designed for resting the ring on. It has two guide rollers, one on either side of the cutting wheel. The cutting wheel is attached to a handle here. When you rotate the handle, you'll rotate it so that the cutting or the grinding disc rotates towards you. And this will ensure that the cutting takes place towards the center of the piston. You want to cut in that direction to minimize the likelihood of getting a burr on the edge of the ring that would score the cylinder wall. Now there is, as you might imagine, quite a bit of advice out on the internet regarding exactly how to file rings. Now the tool is designed with two guide rollers so that you could put the ring on here and sort of squeeze the ring together, put it on here, squeeze it together against the guide rollers and grind both sides at the same time. Certainly this will make the job go faster, but there's a little bit of risk associated with that, and so I prefer not to do it that way. I prefer to grind only from one side of the ring or the other, but not both. And there are two reasons that I do that, and that is because, one, these angles are not straight. When the ring is spread, as it is here, they're actually at sort of an angle away from each other. And that's by design, so that when you squeeze the ring together, they end up parallel to each other at the minimum gap. And if you're not careful with how you grind it, then you could end up so that when the ring is at its minimum gap, you've got an angle one way or the other. And if you lose the factory cut here, it can be very difficult to sort of get it back again, at least as precisely as the manufacturer did. So I leave one side alone and I grind only from the other side, and that allows me, when I place it on the grinder, to be very careful in rotating the ring to line it up so that the manufacturer's angle is parallel with the cutting wheel. And then I cut very slowly. I'll do maybe 10 rotations and then I'll stop. Once you stop, you will have created a burr on here where the grinding occurred. So you'll have to take a jeweler's file and sort of file that burr from both sides and from the back corner of the ring. And you always want to do that towards the center of the piston. Always grind towards the center of the piston, file towards the center of the piston. And so that's why I grind it from only one side and not from both sides. But to each their own. I'm sure there will be people in the comments section that will froth at the mouth over how you have to grind from both sides together. To each their own. The idea is that when you're done, you have achieved a gap that is within the manufacturer's specifications and is parallel at the minimum gap position. And so these tools are very easy to use. The best piece of advice I can give you, besides making sure your angle is all right, is be very deliberate in how you support the ring when it's on here. Don't just put it on here and grind, because the ring can bounce up and down as the wheel rotates. It can actually chatter, and if you're not careful, you can break a ring that way. And so I choose to put a finger on either side and press down. So this finger right here is just outboard of the roller and pressing down hard on the table right there, and then the rest of my hand is holding the back side of the ring. So the ring is very well supported against the cutting tool. That way when I rotate it, I can control the ring, keep it from moving, keep it from chattering, get a nice slow deliberate grind. When I take it off, file the burrs off, and then I'll go ahead and stick it in the bore and measure the gap. When you're doing this, less is more. I would recommend doing only a handful of turns at a time, at least for the first couple rings, until you get an idea of how many turns it takes to grind the rings. And you'll find that it's different depending on the alloy of the ring. So this is a top ring, and this ring is a lot more dense than my second ring, and so it takes a lot more turns to grind this ring than it does my second rings. So I'm not actually grinding this one for demonstration purposes, because I've already ground it to the correct gap for my application. One other thing I like to do, and it's not mandatory, of course, you can do it however you want to, but as I rotate this ring back and forth, hopefully the light will catch it up. But right here where my finger is a letter M. It's for Mahle. Mahle marks their rings in a number of different ways to identify which side of the ring is the top side of the ring. Sometimes they'll put a little dimple. Sometimes they won't have any markings, and you'll have to look at the bevel that's on there. But for a lot of the rings, Mahle's kind enough to put a capital letter M there, or it's actually their logo to M. And so when I grind the rings, I grind them with the top of the ring up. It's just something I do. I really don't think it matters, but it's something that I do for consistency. I just find that when you do things the same way every single time, you're less likely to make mistakes that way. And so I always put them on the same exact way, line them up the same exact way, rotate the same number of turns, file it the same way, measure it the same way, and I do that for all of the cylinders, and I come up with fairly consistent results in doing so. I'll share my numbers with you, and you'll see that I'm not perfect, and I make no claim to be, but my numbers are well within tolerance. And so like I said, these are already ground, but I just wanted to go back and show you what the grinding tool looks like and give you a general idea of how it's used.